Good evening, everybody. While my baby's asleep on the couch, I'm gonna try to get this video done. Hopefully he doesn't wake up. All right, this is the current status of my Dirk handles. I've been working on these for a while. It's been probably a couple months since I last posted a video on the current status. Basically, this is kind of where they're evolving towards. So instead of using razor blades, I'm using wood chisels, a little like wood carving tool set. And this is after I kind of sanded it. I'm gonna carve some extra lines into this, like 4 or 5 little lines. But once I get the full shape all finished, once I'm ready to actually get to that point, this one's just about where I want it, I think. Before I start doing the final, I gotta actually take a file to the pommel a little bit. But anyways, all right. This is the same one, basically, except maple. I had to kind of carve off the triquetra and have some more work to do on this. It's also a little bit bigger in diameter, but that's all right. So these two are basically the same design. Got 2 twisted knots or braids going around the grip. All these pretty much have the 3-finger grip. This one's got the triple braid on the lower part of the pommel. Well, lower if you're holding it like this, but higher if you're holding it the proper way, because the blade's going to be down here, and then there's the pommel. Then you got a twist, which I need to do a little more fine tuning of. So, but basically did some sanding on these 3. These are getting a lot closer to where they need to be. This one here, still got to do carving. I'm going to actually add a triquetra to this. I am not probably going to add a triquetra to this, although I could. Thinking about it, I'm going to kind of thin down the haunches a bit, though. Kind of like I did here. So plan with that guy. So, yeah, it just still has a lot of work to do. Let's go to these ones first. So these are going to have brass caps at the haunches and also on the pommels. This will have a brass disc on the pommel, but it's going to have, as you can see, the lines I just drew here. I'm going to carve that in a little bit, like 1/8 of an inch. And then what's going to happen is, as the blade's going down, I'm going to have a piece of brass extending beyond this and then folding over, like what you see on historical pieces. Now this one is going to probably have the same knot pattern as these two. I'm going to add a triquetra. I may or may not do these little figure 8 designs. I'm probably going to have brass on this flat piece, although I could do the Vince Evans way of doing it and actually like carve some kind of little Greco-Celtic little sort of knot design. It's kind of my little interpretation. The same design that exists around the circumference of the Perth targe. But I digress. A couple lines drawn in here because I'm going to do probably a twist knot here, and then the 3-strand braid like you see in these guys, like I said. But we'll see. I might change my mind. But I could leave this thing plain, but I don't really want to. I want it to be a little more developed. This is the exact same concept, not finished obviously, but in maple. Trying to do one of each design. This is more of an offset pommel. You will see that more frequently on like Victorian era Dirks, more the regimental style. This is going to have a little more of a Jacobite kind of look with the triquetra and the haunches being carved the way they are. I'm actually going to probably thin the handle down a little bit. That's why I have lines drawn in. I'm debating how I'm going to do that. And these lines here are to divide, where I'm going to have probably a twist and, probably a braided knot and a twist. There are some examples from like the Jacobite era that where the pommel's actually, where it is offset, but not necessarily in that direction. It could be offset in this direction. So from this angle, it might be more like this from the front rather than from the side. So I might do a little Celtic knot pommel. We'll see. Now the trick is, if I decide to make the tank all the way through, it's gonna have to bend this way a little bit. Otherwise, it's just, you know, how am I gonna get it threaded on without it going past the center? So those are some things to worry about. This is gonna be the same thing, except in, you guessed it, maple. I'm anticipating this will look a little bit better though. The profile is gonna look a little more, a little nicer, but we'll see. Obviously, from at the moment, it's not quite carved out. And this is an earlier example of one of my carved handles. I recently took the wood chisels or proper carving knives and actually took what was originally cut out lightly with a razor blade and kind of gave it more of that embossed look. There's still work to do. Did some sanding. Need to, you know, you see little spots here that need to be carved. Also, the pommel is wider from the front view than it is from the side view. I'm debating kind of narrowing that out. I sort of have a couple of, that kind of faded off a little bit, but basically you got a couple lines drawn with ink to kind of show how I might make it a little more circular. We'll see. Oops. All right. The pommel, I need to anneal that because that's a piece of brass off of an old water faucet or handle. The problem with cast brass is that once it's cast, it kind of hardens, and you have to anneal it in order to get it soft enough. Like I'm able to cut, I cut this thing with an angle grinder. It's got little, you can see scratches on it. I tried taking a file to that. It didn't work too well. Brass does actually get hard. So, but when it comes to drilling it and tapping the thread, that actually was not hard at all for some reason. So anyways, this is kind of special. It's oak from my mom's tree at the home I grew up at. So I'll probably keep this one. Also, kind of like with these guys here, I might get rid of this sort of round chamfer and give it more of a flat bevel. Of course, that means that this spot here is going to be a little bit thinner. That's okay. That is going to be okay. Also, the scabbard is not going to be this wooden one, probably. I could technically thin this thing out. A couple changes here. Gonna happen. I can thin this thing down significantly on the front and back and a little bit on the sides, but I'd also have to carve this a little sharper because you see the lines I drew on the blade with a pin. That's going to make it look a little more Jacobite, I guess you can say. You know, we can keep it like this. I don't care as much for the leaf-shaped blade. I really want more of a point, because that's when the Dirk was at its finest as a fighting knife. It had more of a sharp point. I'll still have that false edge right there is still going to be probably sharpened, and of course the main edges, you know, the front edges or the true edge is going to be sharpened as well in time. But I noticed that even though there are examples of wooden scabbards out there, there's also plenty of leather sheaths that are surviving. And of course you have wooden scabbard. All the wooden scabbards I've seen for Dirks have leather over them. But there's also leather that does not have a wooden core underneath. And the wooden core would make a little bit more sense if you're doing like a knife and fork set, which you do see on a lot of Victorian and post-Victorian style Dirks. Yet the same concept also did exist on some Jacobite era Dirks. It wasn't strictly a Victorian era thing. If anything, the Victorian era Dirk was kind of harkening back to an earlier time period, even as far back as the Balak dagger. So, which obviously these little haunches here, you know, kind of are reminiscent of, on purpose, obviously. So, yeah, I'm gonna take an angle grinder with a flap sanding disc and carefully grind that away. Dipping it into a bucket of cold water to keep it cool as I grind away at it. That's kind of the method I've used with saw blades and, you know, saw blade knives, but kind of go from there, make the profile look nice. Also, I need to I need to kind of grind into the brass cap a little bit, because right here you can kind of see how the blade's moving around. It's not seated properly, and I realized only after doing this and one other Dirk how important it is for these to be properly seated. I think some historical examples may not have been as well seated, but either, but most of them were. Plus, I had that brass that would go, like I'm gonna have on these guys here, the brass that attaches here with rivets, but also goes over the blade a little bit. It goes just over that part of the ricasso, just, you know, kind of sort of at a 45-degree angle. Here's the blade, here's the top of the handle. It kind of goes at that sort of angle. So at least some of the ones I've seen. I've seen Vince Evans' way of doing it. It's a little bit different than the historical ones I've seen, to the best I can tell. But I mean, I need to look at, maybe I need to pay a little more attention to the way he does his, and I might be wrong. But I've seen one example that is different than the historical examples I've seen. Right here, I was actually trying to match the brass to the handle instead of the handle of the brass. Truth is, this whole thing has to come apart anyway, because I have to reseat that. So I'm probably most likely going to actually like file that down, and ultimately have to refile the wood as well. That side's not so bad, but yeah, you can see how that's kind of moving around. So things to take care of also. Something that kind of more firmly fixes this